We're still in the Maamar Zochor 1934, page 148, bottom of the page. Yesterday, we learned a beautiful mashal of a Rav and Talmud, a teacher and his student, and what the proper way of being a student is, and that is that the idea that your teacher teaches you becomes one with you. In Hebrew, the word used in Chassidus, I should say in Chassidus, the word used, which is nis atzem, nit atzem. The root word Hillel is etzem. And there's the nifal. Those that went to Upan should know this. Nifal, right? It has become part of you. There is etzem, it's you. Nit atzem, something made it become part of you. And what is it in this case? That you're completely subservient to listening to the teacher, to hearing what the teacher has to say, not thinking at the time when you hear your teacher speak, what is my teacher saying? How do I filter it? All that is a contradiction to the first step of being a makabel. And there, as I said in a few shiurim earlier, there are different steps, 3 or 4 steps in the proper procedure and progress in receiving information. For the information to come in properly, to be filtered properly, to be digested properly, and to be used properly. Now let's go to the bottom, to the last few lines where it explains how this is relevant to the discussion on hand here about Chochmah and Bina, or within Chochmah, the 2 aspects of Hasoga, Haskola, and Hasoga. So we are now V'zeu, on the 4 lines from the bottom, the 3rd word, V'zeu b'seichel v'hasoga protis. V'zeu b'seichel v'hasoga protis. This idea is found in a specific idea. Im misatzim im lav. Does one become one with the idea or not? Ukamoi, for example. Ukamoi kain. Just that this is true regarding a specific idea, Yuvam b'chlolus ha'inyan hasoga l'gabi idea. We mentioned earlier there's 2 concepts. There is the comprehension of the mind, and there's the mind's eye, which we call re'iyah. It's so clear to you that the mind's eye, it's like you see it in front of you. So we made a difference between the depth of re'iyah, of seeing something vis-a-vis the mind's eye, or just understanding it. So the Rebbe says that what we said earlier about nisatzim will also clarify for us the virtue of re'iyah over hasoga. And he says, the re'iyah hu shetofeses es ho'etzem, re'iyah grasps the essence. When you look at something, even if you don't understand it, you know what? You just saw the entire thing. Now, what does it mean you saw the entire thing? Is there something behind this thing that you saw? Yes. But it's all encapsulated in what you saw. So the first moment from the first moment of seeing it, you saw it all. Now the question is whether you understand it all, but you saw it all. Next line, v'hasoga. Comparatively speaking, conversely, when it comes to understanding something, hirak hispashtus hadavar ve'ena misatzim. What you understand is only the extension of the issue and not the essence of the issue. Because in understanding, it's my mind with my opinion that intervenes and interprets what I'm understanding. Whereas in seeing something, even the seeing of the mind's eye over there, it's not an interpretation. I see it. So true, Moshe. When you see something, you have less understanding than when you understand something. But what you see is the entire thing, i.e. the essence, whereas when you understand, you only understand the extension, or what he calls here, the hispashtut. And this is the virtue which Re'iyah has over Hasaga. In other words, now, in many Maimorim, we talk about the virtue of understanding over just seeing. In other words, we have two things, right? We have eyes that see and ears that hear. We identify seeing with the eyes. We identify hearing with the ears. Each has to have a virtue over the other. And that's why both complement each other and make a healthy person. And Hashem says, I want both to be functioning in the human being. Because through both you get everything. Okay, so we need to understand what's the difference between seeing something and understanding something. So the Rebbe explains here, albeit briefly, but the Rebbe explains here that the virtue of seeing is you get the entire thing. I see it. That's it. In other words, let me say it this way. Say what you see, you also understand. Will you see any more of what you see, even if you understand it? No. It's not changing. I see your face, you see my face. That's it. Yesterday, a conservative rabbi said, I look like a Santa Claus. I said, I'm proud. I like my beard. She said, maybe you come here during the holidays. I didn't want to tell her. I don't celebrate that. Rabbi wearing a little yarmulke. Okay, fine. Yes. And we're going to make them more interested in the Jewish experience through Ava and Achdus. But what's my point? She sees me, and she saw the picture behind me of the Rebbe, and before I went on to the Zoom for this meeting, I said to myself, they're going to see the picture. Should I take it away? I said, no. This is who I am. This is my Rebbe. You want to ask me? Go ahead. And they asked me, am I a Mashiachist? Am I this? Am I that? And then we were best friends a half an hour later. When you see a picture, you see all of the person. You don't understand. In other words, she saw the picture of the Rebbe. She saw my face. Hey, wait a minute. We're talking about doing some programs that may be using a facility, a social hall. I'm going to let you, with your big beard, come into my social hall? So then I spoke and explained, and she asked, and the president was on. And at the end, this is not a bad idea. Let's see if we can make it work. That came from dialogue. But what she saw is what she's going to get. She's getting this beard, and she's getting that rabbi. That ain't changing. It doesn't mean I'm pushing it into her face, and doesn't mean I'm but in other words, if they agree to this idea, they know what they're getting, and we were very open. That's the virtue of seeing. Understanding is, in a sense, secondary. In other words, it's true in this scenario, if all she would have gotten is the seeing, she would have said, I don't want this big beard and this rabbi, and forget it, we're not doing business together. Once she saw what she's getting, and I explained what she's getting, and that I'm not a threat to them, and they were able to dialogue and question, and now they're going to think about it, and see if it can work itself out. Either it can or it can't. The point being that the dialogue is the hasaga. What she saw is the re'iyah. So re'iyah is you get all of it. Yes, Hillel.
So we said that hasaga was a function of bina, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
Yes.
So perhaps another way of saying this idea is that just as the Chazal define bina as lahavin davar mitoch davar, we understand one thing from another, from within another. So that we could say hasaga is like understanding something in its context or in perspective to what it is. So if you just see something, this happens to me often, I'll see some shape or something like that at a distance. I won't know what it is. And then and then all of a sudden I'll figure it out in context. It's a park bench, or it's a box, it's whatever. And so l'chora, that's a function of hasaga.
It's a function of asaga, correct?
Yeah.
But I want to mention to you that here we were talking about the aspect of hasaga as it exists in chokhmah. Overall, hasaga is bina, but we learned earlier in the Maamar that there's also two aspects to chokhmah. But overall, yes, let's leave it for the most simple way that hasaga is bina. Moshe, are you following?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Avram, you with me?
Yeah, the way I would understand it, Rabbi Dolphin, is that saga is the initial part of Bina. It's like transitioning from Hakma into Bina. The Bina, you define that aspect even more so, come to you understand it.
I didn't hear the last part of your sentence. What? After the transitioning?
It leads into Bina. And then once it's into Bina, it gets more defined like a developed till you get a clear
right, okay, but all of that's called hasaga, comprehension, development. Okay? But I want to know if you all follow the virtue of seeing, even the mind's eye seeing, that you get the whole picture, although you don't understand the picture. And that's a very important. Yeah, what?
I mean, you say see the whole picture. You don't understand. You mean you don't understand? So, meaning, you see the car. You see the entire car. That's on the street or parked in the parking lot. But you don't know. You know it's a car, and you know that it drives and takes you from point A to point B. But you don't know how the engine works. You don't know how the internal combustion works. You don't know how the transmission exactly works.
Right.
Powertrain, the axle.
Correct.
Different components.
Right. But Moshe, after, say you're a mechanic or you went or you read up about it, and now you know, has that changed has what you saw before been expanded? No, the picture's not getting any bigger. The same car you will see after you understand it or before you understand it. Why? Because, go ahead.
I mean, yes, it's the same car. It's the same car. It's the same paint job, same hubcaps, tires.
Yeah.
I mean, you perhaps you appreciate it more.
That's a different word. Appreciation comes from hasaga. You're right. When you understand something better, you appreciate it more. But listen to this. Appreciation goes along with compromise. I appreciate it more. Because for me, I understand it. Give you an example. That's something just came into my mind. We have a certain way of our shiurim. Okay? There are some people that they're not interested in this. They want to just learn text and heavy stuff, Kabbalah and Chassidus, and make with the finger this way and the piece, and the Talmud and all that. They're not interested in stories and psychology and character issues and dialogue. It doesn't talk to them. So in other words, the dialogue and understanding is subjective. It's subjective. It's not objective. Maybe that's the good word. Seeing is more objective and understanding is more subjective. How does that sound?
We'll take it.
No, but do you follow? Yeah. Does it make sense what I'm saying? That when you go ahead.
In addition, I'd say one of the my understanding of the neurophysiology of the eyes are that each eye is controlled by the opposite hemisphere of the brain and feeds into the opposite hemisphere of the brain. So the brain then has to put together the images and make sense of it.
Uh-huh.
So that's another function of Re'iyah and Hasaga. My understanding is that when the way the eyes work, we see everything upside. The initial perception is everything's upside down, and the brain reverses it so that it looks up right side up to us.
Oh,
That's
interesting.
another function of dream.
That's very interesting. Okay, let's continue inside. Good. ואשר על כן, הנה הסקולה שהוא חוכמה נמשך למרחק. When we talk about haskalah, intellectualization, which is associated, Hillel, not with hasaga, rather, Moshe, with chokhmah, not with bina, but with chokhmah, nimshach lemerchak, its impacts, it influences it to the distance. It has a much larger impact. Hasaga, as like Moshe used the good word, appreciative, but it's limited to your appreciation. Seeing something, it doesn't depend. That's why I use the word objective. It's more objective, so it doesn't depend on the subjectivity, so therefore it can go on and on and on. It's not created by the comprehension. It is. It is. That's it. It is. It is what it is. That's why he says, Haskalah, which is creativity, which is associated with the element of Chokhmah, Nimshach lemerchak, a creative idea. A creative idea goes from its point of inception, when the idea comes to you, all the way till the beautiful piece of art is drawn months later, years later, etc., etc. Or the person who was a scientist dabbling in stock for years, he told me this, and a game stock or something, I forget now, it was in the .com, and it took off and became finally a very wealthy person from his idea that he started 20 years ago. The idea travels very, very far. And we don't know when the idea will come to fruition. You could say that was the Rebbe's idea of Mashiach being the reality of our time. And, here it is in Hasag, in comprehension, where's Mashiach? We don't get it. So we have to flip back to the mode of Chachma, of creativity, and say, it has, what do they call that? Long shelf life. Yeah, it has long shelf life. So from that vantage point, there hasn't been a degradation in the quality of the Mashiach creative idea. Just because the idea has not come yet to fruition, it doesn't lessen the idea. The idea is in its potency the entire time. And there'll be a certain time when the idea will come to fruition. So I'm sure, Moshe, in your work, you've had ideas for different things that are brewing in your head for 20 years. For whatever reason, that it hasn't yet come where it's come out yet, but the idea is still fresh. I see this in writing. Many times things come to me. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was walking, Shabbos, I was walking, and a name for a book that I one day would like to write was Walking Between the Drops. Life is about drops coming down. Sometimes they're good drops, and sometimes they look like bad drops. And you have to know how to walk in between. And I thought I love that idea, and I haven't written a book with that title, but it's still percolating in my mind. Walking between the drops, walking between the drops, walking between the drops. The idea is fresh. The idea has not lost any of its freshness because it's 5-10 years later and I haven't done anything about that idea. And so, yes, Hillel.
There's a Hebrew idiom like that, like slang, lirkod ben atipot, I think.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
Okay. I've heard something like that.
Okay. Thank you for
But it's a
telling me.
great idea.
Yeah. It's a great idea. You know, though we have to have
No,
ideas.
the idiom is dance between the raindrops.
Right, dance between
Yeah.
raindrops. Right. I'm using the word walking between the drops.
Right.
But ideas are important, very important. Ideas make us alive, fresh, and not stale. That I'm telling you. And the question is, what do you do with it? You know, if you go off on your own merry way and you could mess yourself up and mess up others, like this tyrant, what he's doing now. He has an idea now that he has to go back to pre-war and conquer land and all that. So he's making a mess out of all of Europe and all of the world. I mean, cuckoo, crazy. I mean, like, you know, but in his mind, he's not crazy. He's calculating. He knows what he wants, and probably, unfortunately, in Teva, will get what he wants. He will conquer, Ukraine, throw out the old leadership, put in his puppets, and say, "Here's your country," right? So, an idea could be abused too, this idea, I'm sure, has been brewing in his cup for 20, 30 years already. You know, so ideas are very, very strong. That's what the Rebbe says here in the Maamar, Nimshach lemerchak. It's drawn very far, very distant. The idea will have long-term value. Don't give up on your ideas. Never give up on your ideas. Even if they haven't happened for years, keep them active. Because at the right time and in the right place, that idea will be valuable, will be needed. Okay? V'hasaga shul bina, Hillel here he says it clearly, hasaga, which is bina, zeu rak hispashtus. That's only an extension. That's not the essence. Ve'enai, top of 149, nimshach lemerchak. It doesn't allow itself. Subjectivity doesn't allow itself to be drawn far, distant. It's limited to the subjective interpretation and comprehension, which at the time is very sweet and good and important. But unless there is the idea backing the comprehension, it's going to cease and end at a certain point. This is the Nekuda. What's the difference? So the Rebbe said this is the intellectual difference between Haskalah and Hasaga. Now he says, what is the difference between these two concepts in regarding serving Hashem? The Bina, who is Baininus. Bina is contemplation, reflection, meditation. Shehu rak be'ei she'oisik bo ba'avodosei batfila. When is the time, Avram, very important, when is the active time, when are you called on active duty to meditate and reflect? When you're davening. Avodas is called Avodas HaTfilah, the activity, the service of davening. That is the time of meditation. When you're working, when you're doing your job, now is not the time to do his bunniness. Now you got to make sure you draw properly, you write properly, you sing properly, and you counsel properly. And if not, they ain't coming back to you. Okay? Now is not the time to get holy. You want to be holy in the morning. Now, you have to be always holy, but I'm saying the time for active holiness of meditation and reflection is during davening. What happens throughout the day from the meditation that you do during davening? There is a remnant, nishar rak reishim bilvad. There's only a remnant that's left. The Rebbe is saying this in the derogatory way compared to Chochmah in a moment. In other words, we meditate and reflect during the morning, during davening. We're all turned on and inspired. And when it comes time to eating and working later on, it's like You barely realize that you davened this morning like a mensch. What happened? The answer is that your davening engaged the hasaga, the bina, and bina doesn't have long shelf life. So after an hour of davening, and you sit down to eat, and later you go to your work, there's barely any feeling, any recognition that you really davened this morning and you meditated, right? I told you, my mashpia said to me once, so I said to him, if that's the case, why invest in davening so much? So he said, imagine how you would look like if you hadn't davened. And it's very true and very important. But nevertheless, we're not discussing that aspect. Avul Chochma, next line. Avul Chochma. But Chochma shuhu askola, which is the concept of intellectualization, v'hu atzmi, and it's the essence. Chochma, the creative idea of Chochma, helps you in all aspects of your life on a daily basis. The Chol Inyonov, that all of your matters, and all of your actions, you should feel in them the divinity, the godliness in them. And we'll stop here, and tomorrow we'll conclude the Maamar, but basically, the Rebbe is saying that this difference between Haskalah and Hasaga has its results in practicality too, in the sense that if you only experience Hashem with comprehension, as much as Moshe, you quoted Rabbi Shia Hecht, whoever told you that about the virtue of comprehension of Bina, which is true, nevertheless, we see that it fades away. It fades away slowly. Whereas if you hold on to the idea, to the chokhmah, it stays much longer, and that's similar to when you see something. In other words, like this: what's going to be more impressive? What will help a person more? Remembering their grandfather with their beard and yarmulke and payas and tefillin, or the conversations and discussions that you had with him? Which will make the college student or the young adult one day take out their tefillin and say, wow, I was thinking about the way my Zayda looked, my grandfather, wow, interesting, you know? The tendency of understanding is it fades. It lessens. It gets less and less. But an image, a picture, that's why picture's worth 1,000 words, the picture tells it all. When it says in Tanakh, V'hoyu says Marecha, your eyes shall see your instructors, your teachers, and that's why we have pictures of tzaddikim in our houses, and etc., right? That's the concept. That's the concept. I used to have here a picture of Rebbe Kechain of Russia, came to Kfar Chabad, walking at Kfar Chabad, holding a stick with his a sack, his talus. He was older, and and I thought, this is what I want my children to see. This is the genuine Jew who, is already hunched over, he's elderly, but he's coming from a place of holiness and goodness, and this is what we are to emulate as much as possible. The picture, the chokhmah, it goes very far. Whereas the understanding, that's what the Rebbe is saying here. And you daven and you meditate, and then later on it's like you didn't, or there's very little. Why? Because that's the tendency of hasaga. That's the word, Hillel. He's saying that hasaga, in other words, you didn't do anything wrong. You're on the right track. But the tendency of hasaga is such that it becomes less and less. Whereas the tendency of chokhmah is, it remains potent the entire time. And we're equating chokhmah to re'iyah. Chevra, think about it. I think it's a very important nekuda. And we'll see everyone tomorrow. We should have a good chodesh meanwhile. And tomorrow maybe we'll finish and we'll farbring a little bit. Zaygesund. Take care. Bye-bye.